Our guest today is the president of the Chicago Symphony Orchestra. She is considered one of the leading arts administrators in the nation. Our guest today oversees the operations of, number one, the Chicago Symphony Orchestra, number two, Symphony Center Presents, three, the Institute for Learning, and four, Access and Training, including the Civic Orchestra of Chicago and Chicago Symphony Chorus. Prior to joining the Chicago Symphony Orchestra, she was executive director of the Seattle Symphony, a position she held from November 1992 until 2003. Our guest today is a graduate of Stanford University and holds an MBA from the University of Southern California. Ladies and gentlemen, Deborah Rutter. Deborah?
Well, clearly I am speaking to my friends, and I probably didn't need to spend any time preparing any remarks. It's really lovely to see you all here. Thank you for being supportive and coming, and I hope that I can count on you to maybe open your ears with friendship and maybe help spread the word a little bit. I can tell I'm going to need water, so I'm going to ask if I can take that. Thank you. I think everybody should have the opportunity of having lunch sitting between Dr. Green and Jay Doherty. Nothing like making you feel like you're a boring old shoe or something, the two of them. I'll try. And then you can help, promise? Every time I travel down Lakeshore Drive, which is several times a day, or walk on Michigan Avenue, I am struck by the beauty of our city and the incredible forethought our city fathers had more than a century ago. I read that book. When this area was being developed. The protection of the lakefront, the development of those beautiful historic buildings, and the subsequent urban development that we all have participated in have had an extraordinary and lasting impact. They created a place, a home, a landscape, a vision for our city that became the core of our identity. These same visionary leaders were emblematic of the individuals who decided in the last decades of the 19th century that to become a truly world-class city on the scale of the greatest international cities, Chicago needed an orchestra. This tightly knit community of independent businessmen led by Charles Norman Fay, president of the Chicago Gas Company. I love it that we still have that person in that role on our board today. He and that group intended to build an Athens of the Midwest. Truly, it's written in all the documents at the CSO. Our intent is to build the Athens of the Midwest on the shores of beautiful Lake Michigan. They went out, did their research, identified and recruited the best conductor of that time, German conductor Theodor Thomas, to come to Chicago, build an orchestra, and they would guarantee the standards of excellence and operating budget to support such an orchestra. Sounds pretty similar to today, doesn't it? Thomas eventually accepted. It took a bit of time for him to, and there's a beautiful story behind that. But he did eventually accept their offer, and the orchestra and audience he set out to build were the seed that reaped the great harvest of concert programming, music making, and cultural activism that we here in Chicago enjoy to this day. I would love to imagine that Fay and his colleague businessmen founded the orchestra because of their great passion for music, but as we have come to understand from the rich archives of the CSO, it appears that their interest was as much about the health and vibrancy of their city as it was in their interest in music. From the outset, as we all know about the culture of this city, our civic and community leaders were invested in ensuring that our city is healthy, attractive, and competitive in so many ways on a world scale. If they had accepted anything less than the very best, had supported it haphazardly or inconsistently, not embraced the artistic vision of its music director then, as now, the CSO would not be the international treasure we all enjoy week after week, year after year. I speak of the CSO, but I believe it is also true for our other great cultural organizations here in Chicago. We all together can proudly claim to be the bearers of the highest artistic standards of excellence because you, our civic leaders, cultural participants, and citizens of Chicago believe in this city, its people, and its artistic aspirations. The CSO is fortunate to receive a lot of press. Most of it's good, sometimes not. We have extensive coverage of our activities. I'm very grateful for that. We are proud of the tradition of performing remarkable concerts at Symphony Center, at Ravinia, now this year also in the western suburbs at the Morton Arboretum, in communities and neighborhoods around Chicago, as well as nationally and internationally. We have performed in most of the important cities in the world and on nearly every continent. The quality of our orchestra, our audience, you, our audience, and our programming establishes ours as one of the most desirable ensembles with whom conductors and guest artists really set out and strive to perform. We in the audience, we all in the audience, are the beneficiaries of this. But I dare say that our orchestra musicians would state that having a great patron base of enthusiastic, engaged listeners is just as important as their dedication to excellence in performance. This year, we began with a trip to open the concert season of Carnegie Hall, followed by a week-long residency in Mexico. Just a few weeks ago, we concluded a highly anticipated and successful tour to Asia. And in those 5 weeks of travel and concertizing, we shared with audiences in very diverse parts of the world the story, the real magic that is the music making of the Chicago Symphony Orchestra. In each case, whether a historic destination venue like Carnegie Hall, or a small old world theater in Guanajuato, or a brand spanking new concert hall in Tianjin, China, the CSO was there to proclaim the artistic sensibilities and ultimately the character of the city of Chicago. I can't tell you how much fun it is for a music junkie like me to be able to hear our orchestra in all of these concert halls. But more importantly, it gives me great pride to help facilitate the tour and to share the message about our great city around the world. Furthermore, to have patrons of our orchestra and business and civic leaders from Chicago travel in parallel to the orchestra adds a valuable extra dimension to our presence in each city. Last spring, we were in Russia. I hope you all heard about that. We were in Russia at the invitation of the United States Department of State, representing our country in Russia as part of the bilateral commission on cultural exchange between President Obama and then President Medvedev. This residency represented the culmination of a year-long festival of American seasons in Russia. In addition to the concerts that we performed in Moscow and in St. Petersburg, we performed numerous events in community venues, schools, for music students, many who didn't have access to those concerts. So now, as a part of all of our tours, in addition to spreading the word on the artistry of our orchestra, and through the media events and the personal and private interactions, we communicate about the quality of life and the business in our city, and perhaps more importantly, about the values of our orchestra and our city. I'd like to share with you now a short video that talks about our work in communities while we're on tour, which is created actually for the State Department, but when I saw it the other day, I thought, okay, this is a good one to share with you. It talks about who we are as citizen musicians and more about our initiative, and does so much more artfully than I ever could. So, great, thank you.
One of the things we're going to try to show you today is just how, without a single word being said, music can create in us these feelings all together.
Citizen musician is a guiding philosophy at the Chicago Symphony Orchestra, where we seek to expand the role that music plays in cultural and civic life here in Chicago and as the orchestra travels around the world. It really springs from the vision of our current music director, Riccardo Muti, his desire to share music with as many people as possible.
Music is today the most important ambassador around the world, and we know how in danger is the world and what music can bring and can do.
He believes deeply that culture, if it has an equal seat at the table with economics and politics, we actually will have better ways to look at viable solutions to the intractable problems that we face.
We have said this many times around the world, and it sounds rhetorical. You know, music make people better, etc. But one thing is to say, another thing is to make it happen.
When the Chicago Symphony Orchestra visits a country, people expect a great orchestra. What citizen musician activities bring is an expanded perception of what an orchestra is and what this orchestra is. Not only concerts in really extraordinary concert halls, but also a connection as deep and as important with people who might not otherwise hear the Chicago Symphony Orchestra. We've had musicians of the orchestra visit orphanages, rehabilitation centers, and they've engaged individuals who might otherwise feel left out of the society in which they live. Members of the orchestra have also offered great training opportunities for really gifted and aspiring young musicians. In Mexico, those junior high students absolutely were touched by the fact that you had members of the CSO who were there spending time with them and also wanting to speak in a language familiar to them, even if it wasn't so familiar to the members of the CSO.
Bueno, gracias.
We had ensembles perform in a hospital. The experience of seeing the looks on the faces of the children and of the parents was incredibly moving to really get a sense of how there is uncertainty and how music can be a source of comfort in those moments of uncertainty.
When you can share something with somebody somewhat unexpectedly, they get it. The light goes on in their eyes. It's not a performer-audience relationship. It's much more a human-to-human relationship.
As the CSO embarks on international tours, we think more and more about the importance of offering citizen musician activities. And as we have conversations with presenters and consulates around the world, we know that they are points of connection to many other communities, and we want to make sure that we are connecting to those needs. We really believe that those initial interactions will be a part of a long-term relationship, and we think about those not only as international tours, but really as the beginning of international residency work.
As I said, that does a lot more than listening to my words. To hear the music, to see those faces, it's really great. As glamorous as these tours and the other trips we make each year sound, and let me tell you, they sound more glamorous than they really are. I assure you that the most rewarding concerts that we present are those to you, our Chicago family audience. In fact, the weekly ritual of preparing and performing concerts in and around Chicago are the routine which helped to develop the artistic quality of the orchestra. And for those of us lucky to witness so many of those performances, we are actually participating in the artistic process. Beyond all of those concerts, though, it is our involvement in the city itself that provides each of our musicians and those of us on staff with some of our own deepest rewards. I'd like to talk just a little bit about our Citizen Musician Initiative, which you heard my colleague Charlie Grody talking about in relation to our international tours, but we do quite a lot, if not exponentially more, here in Chicago. It is a vital part of our identity as well as of our programming. In the last few years, I've had extensive discussions with our musical leadership, board of trustees, seasoned administrators about the future of the symphony. And what our role in education and the cultural discourse of our community. So how perfect that I can be here today. We also have benefited from significant interaction with our city leaders and business community. This dialogue has placed the CSO in the center of and as a valued resource for the problem solving taking place to address the life of our local community and ultimately the role we play as ambassadors around the world. Our discussions have centered on the issues of education, community relations, enlivening neighborhoods, economic development, cultural enrichment, and addressing issues of violence and poverty. Nowhere in there did I say music, did I? It has also led to partnerships with organizations throughout Chicago that have not previously been our closest collaborators. Not only the City of Chicago through the Mayor's Office or the Chicago School Board, but World Business Chicago, Choose Chicago, and numerous other civic as well as cultural organizations in Chicago. For instance, we now have a strong connection with the Correctional Department of Cook County and in Illinois for all of the work that you may have heard of that we do in prisons. Yes, when we've asked to be a part of this discussion, we get sort of the raised eyebrow. Aren't you asking to come and beg for more money? And we say, no, we're here to be a part of the discussion to help make our city a better place. We want to be a partner on all manner of subjects. From a programming perspective, we take this approach as well. As we develop our annual festivals for inclusion in our concert season, we certainly continue to collaborate with great cultural organizations like the Art Institute of Chicago, Steppenwolf, Goodman, and various other museums, both ethnic and otherwise, the Poetry Foundation, the International Film Festival, for instance. Our rich educational community, not just the music schools, but the colleges and universities, also add a dimension to our work. This year, for the first time, we're working with some interesting social and environmental organizations as well. Our festival this May is focused on rivers and the cultural, environmental, and economic impact waterways have on our communities. What does that have to do with music? Well, you'd be surprised. There's a lot of beautiful music that's written inspired by rivers. Our partners on this festival include Friends of the Chicago River, the Chicago Park District, the Architectural Foundation, thank you very much, the Wetlands Initiative, the Chicago Department of Transportation, and the Water Reclamation District. A 3-week music festival at Orchestra Hall has now become a citywide discussion about the importance of the Chicago River and Lake Michigan. Earlier this week, I and a few colleagues and representatives from the Mayor's Office were witness to some wonderful presentations by several student groups and some classroom demonstrations from Swift Elementary and Waters Elementary on their study of the river. These schools and several others have integrated our festival curriculum into their science, language arts, music, visual art, and social studies curriculum. The feedback from the teachers was really exultant. They told us that the opportunity to integrate arts education in the everyday classroom augment the traditional learning and has had an immensely positive impact on the students. This approach to festival and season planning, as well as curriculum development, has taken us several years to develop capacity around, but we're finding it to be extremely rewarding and are having great traction with our friends, our colleagues, and collaborators around the city. The role of collaboration is not just for the festivals, though, but for all our programmatic considerations. For instance, our work in prisons is done with several partners, a theater group, our chorus, a composer in residence, our musicians, of course, and the correctional institutions themselves. In Chicago, while we were on tour, on the Asian tour I mentioned, we hosted the third biannual Youth and Music Festival with 15 music and educational partners. One of our most loved concert series, Beyond the Score, involves more than a handful of local cultural organizations for each of its 3 concerts annually. And those are not the obvious ones. They might include the Aquarium, the Contemporary Art Museum, the Art Institute, the Planetarium, or any one of the universities, depending on the topic. So you can imagine that the learning for our own team is just as great as it is for our partners and then ultimately our audiences. As we have been working closely with Chicago Public Schools, we have considered and advocated for the important role of arts education integrated into the school day. We have learned quite a lot and considered the needs for the 21st century workforce. The experts tell us that the future employers of our current students will require 4 essential characteristics: critical thinking, communication, collaboration, and creativity. I hardly need to tell you that these are qualities that are the fundamentals of an artistic identity, and perhaps as performing artists and arts organizations, we deploy these skills every day in our endeavors, whether preparing for performances, designing, or executing an artistic plan. We are perhaps the most qualified at supporting the work of our educational institutions in preparing students today for the workforce of tomorrow. Through example and generosity with our resources, the advocacy for integrating arts in the school day has finally been greeted, and I think we can all celebrate the fact that the mayor announced the extended school day and that there will be arts included for every student, not just those in the special schools, but for every student within the school day. It is likely to take many, many more years for us to see this really come to fruition, but we are very proud to be a part of that group who are helping to support this and helping support music education. As a product myself of public school education and music education in a school in particular, I am especially proud that we can play this role. I'm sure that as you travel around the city, you see our banners and our marketing materials with our tagline, World's Best, Chicago's Own. I love that. I think it says it all, World's Best, Chicago's Own. We created this. It is a marketing slogan. That's correct. Am I okay with saying it's a marketing slogan? It is a marketing slogan, but I do believe that it truly represents who we are. A great international orchestra with a superstar music director, conductor, and another superstar as our creative consultant. But we have a deep and abiding commitment to service to our city. That's the Chicago's Own part. Just as our founding trustees stepped forward in a major way to act as wise citizens of Chicago, the CSO believes it can and should act as a citizen musician supporting our city. We are a great artistic institution, and we are a partner to the many great organizations dedicated to ensuring that Chicago remains the greatest possible city. In closing, I'd like to ask you to think of the Chicago Symphony Orchestra as a great artistic ensemble and as an ambassador to the world, bringing music to people everywhere, but also representing you as Chicagoans, that you will think of it as your own orchestra, whether you attend all the time or infrequently, and that we are intimately involved with helping to keep our city a vibrant and active place, a safe place to live. We want to be your partner, and we want to help you support this remarkable, beautiful city. Thank you. Are you okay?
Are there any questions you have on your... Miss Long, just belt it out. This is a symphony.
This isn't a question, it's an appreciation. Long ago, when I was a student in the Chicago Public Schools in the early 1940s, the Chicago Symphony came to my public school to play. No, I'm going to get weepy about it.
Good, that's good.
It was a great thing then, and it's a great thing to hear you're continuing that now.
Thank you. Thank you.
By the way, for you City Club members, long time, compliments like that don't often happen coming from the... Just so you know that. Deborah, it's very impressive. Bill Flynn. It's okay, Bill. I saw the show Chicago. No problem. How's
Maestro Boulez, okay.
yes?
Yeah.
Handle that, will you?
So we have had a little bit of a black cloud hanging over us from a health perspective. And so this question is asking how is Maestro Boulez and how is Maestro Muti. Maestro Boulez is our principal guest conductor, and he was to be conducting this week. In 2 weeks' time, he will be celebrating his 88th birthday. And he's actually doing really, really, really well. He had some eye problems that some of you may remember if you were at concerts previously. He's doing fine. He had kidney stones, and so he wasn't able to travel. And when you're 88, so he's very, if anything, we have to worry about his mental health because he's sorry that he's not here. And Maestro Muti is conducting an opera right this very minute. So he's doing fine. He just had to have that surgery and you can't put it off. So he is doing just fine and he's very, very anxious to be here. I'll be seeing him next week in Rome and talking about all the plans because we have him booked chock-a-block in April. He has a lot to do while he's here and he's very excited about that. So thank you for asking.
Okay, we have one more question it's a long question. From Mary Jane Keitel. Where are you, Mary Jane?
Here she is.
All right. Bear with me. From the Field Museum. 2 fine orchestras, the Minnesota Orchestra and the St. Paul Chamber Orchestra, have been locked out by their management. Now is the time for you to go, ooh.
Yeah.
Good. Since October, what can other cities learn from the CSO about how to manage to maintain artistic quality and financial responsibility? 25 words or less, please.
Yeah. We are very fortunate here in Chicago to be living in a place that has a history of supporting all the arts. Field Museum, all of the campus, all of the small theaters, the big theaters, opera, and we have been doing, this wonderful community have been doing this for, in our case, more than 122 years. And I think that really great board leadership is really critical. And bringing the board really close to the art is really critical. For having been in this field for 35 years, I can tell you that it used to be that the Minnesota Orchestra was really known for being one of the best managed and one of the most vibrant communities, which is not to say that they have a bad manager there now, but I think that if you don't keep the board and the musicians and your community close to one another and talk to one another about one's issues, you can really run astray and you have different priorities. You cannot really evaluate orchestras in the same sort of cost-revenue ratio basis because somebody's going to say, why do you have 16 first violins? Why can't you do it with 12? And if you ask that question and you're not really open to the answer, then you're going to have an argument about that. And that's the argument they're having, more or less. And the answer, ultimately, for those of you who are curious, is there's a balance, depending on what the repertoire, depending on the piece that you're performing, you need to have a balance of all of the instruments and how they work with one another. The difference between 14 and 16 is a little bit different, and depending on the size of the stage and the size of the auditorium, that's a different issue. But these are issues of art, not finance. And if you try to overlay finance all the time, you will never make a good case in the world of art because it just doesn't work that way. So I think what's happened in St. Paul and Minnesota, where the orchestras have famously been locked out, which is, as far as I know, never happened before, and especially for this period of time. It's a situation where you've got a lack of communication.
Okay, pretty good answer.
That was not 25 words or less, but
Damn good answer. How about a nice round of applause? That's tremendous. We got this.